I'm Cone from Sum 41, and you are lucky enough to be watching Richard Metal Fan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 258 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews, calling from Zoom. Have the honor and the privilege to speak with the great Jason Cone McCaslin from the legendary Sum 41. How are you doing today, Cone? Glad to
All
have you
right.
on my show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad we could finally make it happen.
Awesome. It's so glad to have you here. Do people still call you like Jason or Cone?
Well, more people call me Cone. I think Jason's like my parents call me Jason. I have some friends back like where I grew up that would call me Jay, but
Yeah.
for the most part, it's Cone since I was like 14 years old.
Yeah. And one thing I always thought was interesting because watched like you and Dave on Loudwire's Wikipedia Fact or Fiction. I'm surprised like Graham never brought up because I saw a cool antidote. It said like you got your nickname Cone from Derek because you like frequently ate ice cream cones at lunch.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was high school. It was like I never I never brought a lunch to school. And when we first met in ninth grade, the cafeteria had these things called the Great Canadian Cone, and and it was just like an ice cream cone wrapped up in like paper. And bought one of those every day and ate it for lunch.
Oh yeah. Like what's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Well, at that time it was just a vanilla cone with like some chocolate on it. But yeah, I you know what I still like vanilla a lot. I still like I'll go for like coconut. I don't like anything like crazy. Like I kind of like the basic stuff.
That's cool. So pretty much like the format is, I want to talk about like your musical history and sort of like do a rundown of your discography, but take me back to Young Cone. So kind of growing up in Ajax, Ontario, what were the first bands that got you into rock and metal and what made you want to slap at a bass?
Uh, well, so the first metal album I ever heard, which is probably the first metal band I ever heard, was "Injustice for All" from Metallica. My neighbor, who eventually became the singer of my first band, Ryan, had it on CD, and he had this little ghetto blaster, and he said, "You got to hear this band." He heard it from another friend, and he bought the
Yeah.
record. And I remember hearing Blackened, and it was just
Yeah.
like the speakers were like woofing, like pounding. And I was at the time I was probably 10 or 11 years old.
Wow.
I was thinking like, wow, the bass is really loud.
Yeah. And the irony is there's the bass is inaudible on that album.
Exactly, yeah. So at the time I thought the bass was really loud, almost like too loud for the speakers, but it was really the guitars that had so much
Yeah.
low end in them. So that was like the first metal album I ever remember hearing. I think really the band that got me into playing bass it's probably a generic answer, but it was Nirvana, because it was that time. It was the early '90s. I was 13 years old. I was going into high school, and my same friend had a guitar. Friend across the street had just got a guitar, and my friend down the street had some drums, and he was like in the elementary school band. And so they were thinking about starting a band, and we were all kind of best friends. And I was like, well, I want to be in the band. And they were like, well, if you want to be in the band, you gotta be the bass player. And I was like, again, 13 years old, I was like, what the hell is a bass guitar? So, and at that time, there's no internet, obviously. So I bought a bunch of music magazines and started researching on this thing called a bass guitar. And so I, uh, I convinced my mom somehow. I said, I have to be in this band with my friends. Like, you have to take me up to the music store. And she reluctantly drove me up there and bought me. I had to find a bass that looked exactly like Chris's from Nirvana's. It was black. It was an El Degas. And unfortunately, I don't have it anymore. I wish I still did, but I'm sure it sounded like shit. But it was black and it kind of looked like his from the early days of Nirvana. And that was it. I just started, we just started basically writing our own songs at 13 years old. And I was in that band for like 4 years before Sum 41.
Yeah. Yeah, and tell me about like joining Sum 41 because you joined in 99 and how'd you get to know like Derek and Steve and everybody?
Yeah, Derek and I met basically, I think and Dave actually, the first day of high school. He came from a different elementary school, and so did Dave. And we all there was like 4 or 5 schools that got fed into this high school. and we were all from different elementary schools, but we were all in bands and different bands. Like Dave was in a death metal band, and Derek was in kind of a grunge band, and I was in a grunge band, and uh, I think we gravitated towards each other very early on in high school because we were in bands, and I think we wanted to like play together and get some basement shows together. So I think we met, Derek and I, probably first day geography class. That we had geography and history that would flop, and we were in the class together. So we became quick friends. And Dave ended up joining Sum 41 in, I guess it was '97. The band started in '96. Around in 1998, they were on this East Coast tour, and we were really good friends all through high school, and our bands would play together. And but in 1998, they were on this East Coast of Canada tour, and they got into a van accident. And I believe the old bass player, Rich, was driving the van. So I think he got freaked out by the whole thing. When they got home, he quit the band, but they had a bunch of shows lined up from like, the end of '98 into '99. And they called me up and was like, hey, we have all these shows coming up, and Rich just quit. Would you fill in for the shows? And I was like, yeah, for sure. And at the time, my band, we didn't really play a lot of shows because our singer was, I don't know, stage fright. He didn't really like playing. He liked practicing. He liked smoking weed, going to a basement and just like jamming. That was his thing. He's like, let's get a 12-pack of beer and like, half, I don't know, an ounce of weed, and let's just go play for 2 hours in a basement. And that's basically what we did for 4 years of that band. So I was excited because it was like, wow, I get to play some shows. The shows started happening. I think I started kind of learning and rehearsing in the end of '98. And the first show, I believe, was like January, February of '99. And then we just kept playing. And I think there was somewhere around, I don't know, probably the spring of '99 or late winter of '99 that I made the decision. I was like, this is really fun for me. And this is before like any label interest or anything. There was no label interest or anything like that. I just found it really fun to be in Sum 41, and I called up who were my other best friends that I was in the band with. I just said I'm gonna leave that band. I'm gonna join Sum 41, and that's how it happened. And we just kind of went from there. We made an EPK, sent it out to labels, and labels in the US started coming up and seeing us play. I guess it was like summer or fall of '99.
Yeah. And then you got signed to your first label, I believe it was at Island Records. So how did Island Records find Sum 41, and what was it about that made you guys be like, that's the label we should go to?
Yeah, it was interesting because there was, once we made this EPK thing that we had, it was like us basically, I don't know if you've seen it, but we were just going around our hometown, and we had water guns, and we drive around and we lean out the
Yeah.
window and
I
support
think
people.
I seen some videos from that, like the Make No Difference video.
Yeah. So it's basically like the Makes No Difference video, like the old Makes No Difference video, the one that doesn't have DMX in it. And so we had all this footage of what we were shooting anyway. Like we weren't necessarily gonna make a video of it. We just thought it was funny to film it all the time. We'd take a camcorder to like house parties. We'd take it everywhere, film everything. And we decided to, put some of our songs over this footage and then send that out to record labels, because we thought maybe that might catch some attention, because we weren't getting any attention at the time. So, and it's exactly what happened. Was Hollywood Records, Rob Cavallo, who was, produced all those Green Day records and just did the new one again. He did Dookie, and he did Insomniac and Nimrod and all the Warning, American Idiot. Like, so he decided in '99 he wanted to come up and see us, and we were like, holy shit, Rob Cavallo is coming up to see us in Toronto. And so he came up, and then he flew us down to LA, and he was really interested. He wanted to sign us, and at the same time, all these other record labels were kind of catching wind of us. And so in a course of a week or two, every label wanted to come up and see us. It was really nuts. And we decided that we were going to do a residency at this place called Ted's Wrecking Yard in Toronto every Tuesday or Wednesday. I forget. I believe it was Wednesday, but it doesn't matter. And so I think we did it for like, I don't know, 5 weeks in a row or 6 weeks in a row. And then every week, more and more people would come see us play. Even around Toronto, people were like, who is this band? Who is this young band? And so, these, local musicians would come and see us play, but also all these big record companies in the US. And by the end of it all, it was down, we narrowed it down in our own minds to Interscope and Island. And, you know, we were in meetings with them all the time, went down to Interscope in LA and Island, and we met with everybody. And I think just at the end of it, we just really liked the team over at Island. They just seemed cool. The head of Island at the time was Leor Cohen, and he was around the Beastie Boys a lot in their like early days. He just knew how to speak up on our level, and he just everything that he said in a meeting seemed very, very important, and you could really buy into Leor. And I think we just felt really comfortable with him and the whole team at Island. So we ended up signing with them in '99.
Yeah. And tell me about making that first EP, Half Hour of Power. I thought it was a really great EP. Great time, great first thing for everybody to hear Sum 41 for the first time. So where was that recorded at?
That was at Metalworks in Toronto, and that was basically, so we were playing around, you know, Ontario, Toronto, and you know, suburbs of Toronto, and that was basically just Half Hour Power was recorded in a way like that's how our set list was. So we'd always open with Machine Gun, and then we just played. That was the order, and we'd always end with Another Time Around. So we just decided, you know, now that we're signed to a label, and we were good, we knew we were going to go on tour for a long time, and we wanted something really just to sell off stage. You know, the label was going to try and push us to get on tours, and we had an agent now, and we are like, well, if we're going to go on tour, we should just have something that if we're going to play, we could sell and people could hear us and stuff like that. So that was basically the idea behind Half Hour Power. Is basically more or less a touring album,
Yeah.
and that was kind of our set at the time.
Yeah, especially love like all that those songs go well. Like the opening track, "Grab the Devil by the Horns and Fuck Him Up the Ass," going into Machine Gun, THT, even Makes No Difference. Like even seeing those like old videos from back in the days, like you guys were just really just like fun and just didn't give a shit, just wanted to fucking have a good time.
Yeah, and I think actually, I think that really mattered back then because we would there was some shows that we would open. I remember opening for like Phoenix TX in Pomona, California. No one knew who we were, and we would sell like 50 CDs off the stage, you know, stuff like that. And it was all because I think you're right. Like I think we were a very fun young band then. It was I think young people could identify with us because we were fun and we kind of didn't give a shit, and you know, we get drunk and on stage and all that stuff. And I think people are like, I like that. Like they could like they felt like they were like us and we were like them, and it was a cool vibe at our early shows.
Yeah, and I also love like the old like videos. Like I have like the Gouge Your Eyes DVD. I especially love like the pizza heist where you all like I don't know if you like actually like robbed like pizzas and like sprayed them. Like I'm always curious like about the aftermath of that.
That's some 41 folklore right there. I can't give up anything.
Yeah.
Those
But
days were wild. Like that was in our hometown of Ajax, which at the time was like population 40,000. Now it's like 120,000, but there wasn't really much to do. There was when we were growing up, there was not even a movie theater in our city. So all of these things that we were doing was just like to burn time, to create fun for ourselves. And
yeah.
like I said, we just always filmed it all just because we thought it was really funny.
Yeah. And I also like the early version of It's What We're All About, which eventually you did that song for the Spider-Man soundtrack. So how did you end up like doing a song for that movie soundtrack? Because that's still one of my favorite movies. I even remember seeing it in the theaters when it first came out.
Yeah, we just got approached by I guess the Spider-Man, whoever was doing whatever company was doing it. Um, I don't remember how we got Kerry King. I know because
Yeah.
Rick Rubin. I think this is what happened, but Rick Rubin was a part of Island Def Jam, or he had like an imprint, his own label on Island Def Jam, American Recordings. Actually, I think was like it part of Island Def Jam. So he was kind of a part of the company. He knew that we were big metal fans, and I think he kind of helped us get Carrie, and he ended up producing. That's what it was. We asked him to produce the song, and obviously he did. He was tight with the Slayer guys for obvious reasons, and I think that's how that happened with Kerry King. But to be honest, like that song, that video is probably my least favorite video we've ever done in our career.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, I don't I it's hard for me to watch now, and it was a tough shoot because we were actually upside down performing a lot, like we were harnessed. And
Yeah.
so all that performance of us upside down, that was real. Like we had to really try and like play upside down. wasn't really. I love that Kerry King was in it. That's basically probably the best part of the video.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. When I heard that song, it kind of reminds me a lot of like Beastie Boys a bit. That song reminds me a bit because, back then they were signed to like Jeff Jam, and I know like Kerry King did like a guest solo on one of Beastie Boys songs.
Yeah, yeah. I think he was on was it No Sleep to Brooklyn, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so. I think it was that or Fight for Your Right.
yeah. One of the two. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Maybe.
yeah, I remember hearing that. And I also heard like the version that's like right in the intro to the Fat Lip video with you sort of beatboxing and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that was again that thing in Fat Lip, the video when we were doing the beatboxing in the inconvenience store, that was off the cuff. That wasn't. I don't think that the thing about the Fat Lip video was there was no treatment. There was no treatment for it. Basically, we had a bunch of fans in Pomona, California, because we somehow just kept on playing the Glass House in Pomona, and those were really we could sell out the Glass House on our own, 800 people, and that was the only place in the U.S. that we could ever do that before Fat Lip came out. So we decided to do it there because we're like, well, maybe 100 or 200 kids would show up and just like be in the video. And then all it was just our director was like, I'm just gonna film people doing whatever. Like, there's no treatment. You guys are gonna play. That was basically the only treatment. Even the pain for pleasure bit, that was just off the cuff too, because the stylist, because we were such a new band, the stylist brought all these clothes, not knowing that, thinking like that we would really be into wearing some of those clothes that Paid for Pleasure wore on the video. So we just thought it was funny. We had some downtime. We just started dressing up as 80s rockers or whatever.
Yeah.
We started like just like fooling around. And our director was like, "What are you guys doing?" And he decided just to film it.
Yeah.
So that wasn't even supposed to happen.
Yeah. But tell me about making All Killer No Filler. I thought that was like a great debut full album. So what was sort of like the thought process going into making the debut full length Sum 41 album?
I think we were all a little nervous because this was going to be like the real first album. It felt like the real first album because we had like a big time producer. We had Jerry Finn, so we had known his track record, and we loved a bunch of albums he had done. And Out Come the Wolves, did a Pennywise record, did a bunch of stuff that we were big fans of. So I think, but the thing about Jerry was he didn't make us feel nervous. Like, there was this vibe and aura that Jerry had that just made everything really fun. That was one thing about Jerry. He couldn't really play an instrument, but he could make the process and the recording really, really fun, where you felt kind of at ease and you were, I don't know, you just kind of felt at home in the studio and you're just having a good time the whole time. And we partied a lot on that recording. I'll tell you, he came up to Toronto for, I don't know, I want to say 6 to 8 weeks, and we recorded at Metalworks again in Mississauga, which is like outside of Toronto. And man, he loved to party, he liked to go out, and we went out with him quite a bit. But he just had a good ear too, and you would come up with a bass part or a guitar riff or something, and he knew whether it was good or not, or whether you had to do something else, but he wouldn't sit there and try and show you what to do. He would just say, I think you should just try something else. And he also had great gear. He knew how to get good sounds, and it was just the whole process. I have like really, really great memories of recording that album with Jerry. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing but good things to say about Jerry Finn.
Yeah. But when All Killer No Filler was released, did you start like touring outside of Canada for the first time? What was sort of like the touring like, and what was it like also touring in America for the first time?
Yeah, so in America, we were doing a lot of that on Half Hour Power. Like right off the hop, we were, out with Face to Face and the Boss Tones and Real Big Fish and Phoenix TX, and Blink brought us on tour on Half Hour Power. But yeah, so when All Killer came along, that's kind of when we branched out internationally, and it was basically just like, we went to London, England, and we played, in front of like 40 people, and we were just starting from the ground up, and that was basically everywhere we went. We were just, even though Fat Lip was doing pretty good in the States at the time, people didn't really know what to think of us, or didn't really know about us that much internationally. So it was the whole same thing as like trying to prove yourself, trying to create a fan base, and we kept on going back. That's why we played like 300 shows in 2001, because we were constantly just going back to all these places.
Yeah.
Whether it's like Japan and all that stuff. So yeah, it was a
Yes.
busy
So you pretty much hit like almost every like continent to ever.
a couple times. Like we just like it seemed like Fat Lip got released, so we go around the world. In Too Deep got released, so we go back around the world. It was like instead of like nowadays, it's like album to album, an album gets released, so you go around the world. Back then, it was like almost like each song we released, we go around the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Yeah. Hit every continent except Antarctica, but maybe you can do it. I mean, Metallica did it.
yeah. I still want to play Iceland.
Yeah.
Iceland would be cool.
Yeah. I don't think, have you guys ever played Iceland or no?
No, not many bands. I don't think many bands go up there. I think it's more of like a pop country, but
Yeah.
maybe
And
the
then,
South.
yeah. The next album is Does This Look Infected? I like that album. That's probably, in my opinion, my favorite Sum 41 album. So usually with the debut album, you have like your entire life to write, and there's a lot of hype with the first album. When it came to making Does This Look Infected, did you felt pressure to follow up All Killer No Filler?
Yeah, a little bit because we really only had about 2 months to do the whole thing, and that's like writing and recording. Because like the way things were back then, we were on this like momentum swing where we were kind of ending the All Killer tour, but there was stuff that people wanted to book us for in advance. So it's like we got to have these festivals booked, and so it's like basically like you looked at the schedule, it's like, well, there's only really like 2 months until we have to go back on the road. So everything was done really fast. Like I remember we did pre-production in Toronto. We went to New York City. We like blasted out the album. Came back to Toronto only to find out that our producer thought that things sounded out of tune with the guitars and the bass. So he called us all back to the studio after we'd all thought we'd just recorded the whole album. He's like, "You got to re-record all this shit."
Oh,
Went back.
damn.
Oh, it was nuts. And even like to this day, Derek's got the drive with those sessions on it. He's like, they sound fine. You know, it was just inexperienced producer at the time. And so I remember Dave and I like rushing back into the studio, and I had like a day to do the whole album because it's like we didn't have that many studio days, and we were like finishing a song, and Derek was in the studio next door, the room next door, and he was singing as we would finish. It was like Dave and I would finish, Derek would sing that song, we'd go to the next one. It was like we spent all this time in New York trying to make everything so like good, and then in Toronto when we had to redo it, it was just like quick, 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 you know. But I will say, I think you're right. It is one of our better albums, and the songs on like it's a no skipper for me.
Yeah,
Like I
same.
like every song.
Every song going from starting with like the Hell song to ending with Hooch, it's just like a banger from beginning to end. And I was listening to it on the way home from work, and it still holds up to this day.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny about that one too. There's no slow songs on it either, is there?
Yeah. I mean, there's like a slow part at the end of Hooch where it kind of goes falling.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the only slow part. Yeah,
Yeah. It's kind of funny how it starts off fast and then it ends slow.
yeah, right. I know.
Yeah. And I remember the only time I saw you guys was 2018. You played at the Buckhead Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. It was on the Does This Look Infected 15th. Well, really, it was 16-year anniversary tour. And I thought it was really interesting, like because you didn't play it like how it was like start to finish. You played sort of like shuffled it around and added songs in there. I thought that was like a really interesting approach to an anniversary tour.
Yeah, I think we had the conversation of like it being a little bit too obvious,
Expected.
expected. Yeah, like everyone would know the next song, so we just tried to like mix it up a little bit and
Yeah.
throw different songs in different places.
Yeah, and I remember it was funny because at the show I remember people were like calling out like what songs next and they were wrong every time.
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot like heavier compared to All Killer No Filler. Has a little bit of that darker kind of like tone to it.
Yeah, I think after because we had played so much on All Killer, we had gotten better as a band. And I think, it's just that's kind of what we were into. Like we had toured with a bunch of bands and played a bunch of shows. We felt like we were better and I think we wanted to maybe draw on a little bit of like the metal side of us more and like the harder edge and like, even the chord progressions were now like more minor, so there is a little darker feeling. So yeah, I think we could have in hindsight just gone and done like All Killer No Filler part 2 as probably 95% of bands would have done in our shoes. But I don't think that we wanted to do that again. And I know we consciously didn't want to just be like, oh, let's go make another Fat Lip and another In Too Deep, and we'll be golden. We
Yeah.
really wanted to push ourselves and push the envelope on our band at that point. And we were only, I don't know, 21, 22 years old when we recorded Does Look Infected. And yeah, I think we would have been bored just doing the same album again.
Yeah, yeah, because you can't make the same thing twice. You gotta like keep it interesting. You can't do the same shit over and over unless if you're AC/DC.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And then next up is Chuck, and I thought that was a really good album. Like, what was it like going from Does This Look Infected into Chuck?
Yeah, again, at that point, we wanted to even push it even heavier. I remember getting early demos from Derek, um, and thinking like, oh yeah, here we go. Like, it was a challenging album though. It was challenging, I think, for Steve as well. Like some of the kick patterns and drumming was like was even getting tougher and tougher. He was pushing himself a lot, and I think we were all kind of pushing ourselves. At Chuck, that was kind of a moment where I remember just practicing and practicing and practicing on that album. Like I would have these bass parts, and I was just like, and like songs were fast, and I was coming up with different kinds of bass runs and stuff that were really challenging for me. And I just remember practicing a lot for that album. That was probably the most challenging album up until that point.
Yeah,
But it was cool. You know, we went to LA and went to Sound City to record it, and I think we did overdubs back in Toronto. We had Matt Hyde engineer it, who was, you know, he had done God Hates Us All by Slayer and a bunch of other stuff that we really liked. And we were friends with, we've been friends with Matt for a couple years before that. So yeah, it was cool.
yeah. And hard to believe that this year does mark the 20-year anniversary of Chuck. So, how do you feel about the album now, 20 years later?
I still like the album. Like I don't think there, I mean, there's probably things about it that we all would sit back and be like, I would have done that differently or whatever. But as a whole, I mean, being again so young, this was, yeah, I think people don't realize like we had at that point done 4 albums in 4 years.
Yeah,
So
they're on that grind.
yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of recording, a lot of touring, not a lot of downtime. It was just like go, go, go. And so 4 albums in 4 years, and we were only 24 years old at that point.
Yeah.
So you know, I don't necessarily think always age is a factor about it, but you have to realize like we were young kids, and um, partying a lot, having fun as well as touring and recording, and trying to kind of, you know, at that point, you know, we had all moved out of our parents' house, so we were had to be kind of responsible for these other things that we had. And so yeah, it was a crazy time if I really look back on it. I mean, also coming back from the Congo, where we were doing a documentary, I mean, that just was a life-changing trip as well.
Yeah. Yeah, but I still talking about Chuck because I thought it was great. Like hear songs like "No Reason," "We're All to Blame," and I also love the bitter end, which a lot of people say there's some parts that sound like Battery from Metallica. Was that sort of like intentional or just coincidental?
um I actually don't know. I remember hearing like the demo and recording it and thinking it sounded, there's parts that sound like Battery, yeah, but we never talked about doing like a, let's try and make it sound like Battery. I think it was a, I don't know. I think we were so into Metallica and so into metal at that point that
Yeah,
it probably seeped in, and maybe that one seeped in a little too much. I don't know.
yeah. And
We
Metallica is like the gateways for
but
me,
ours
and
never suited. So
I also love that medley you did on the Icon show. I thought that was great.
that was around the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And how'd you get approached to that?
Uh, well, we did a icon for Aerosmith a couple years prior to that. We did Walk This Way with Ja Rule and oh, he's another rapper that I can't think of right now. I should, because he was a
Yeah,
big hip hop guy. But anyway, we I'll have to look that up after. But anyway, so we'd already done like an MTV icon thing for Aerosmith, and then so when the Metallica icon thing came, we were coming out with Chuck, and they just reached out, or maybe we reached out, maybe the record company reached out. But anyway, we just got news that MTV wanted us to do it, and we were like, oh yeah, we are doing this. And like they want you to open the show too, and we're like, no problem, let's do it. And we
Yeah.
knew at that point we were good enough to do it, and we knew we were going to do it well. And we just decided to do like a medley of songs instead of one. I think everyone else on the show just did one song,
Yeah.
but how can you choose just one
Yeah.
Metallica song?
Exactly. So you mashed up, I think it was Enter Sandman, From the Bells Tolls, and Master of Puppets.
Yeah, Whom the Bell Tolls was first, and then we went into a little bit of Sandman, and then Master of
Yeah.
Puppets, Soul, and of course, yeah.
Yeah. And I love there's like a video out there where you actually played the whole Master of Puppets song. And I think you guys did really good justice with that song.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. Like even after we went on when we toured on Chuck, I remember doing a co-headline with Good Charlotte, and we went on before them, and I think we played the whole Master of Puppets for a couple shows on that tour, and then we realized that all the 12-year-olds in the audience had no idea what we were doing. and so I think we stopped after a few shows. But
Yeah.
yeah, we were like, let's do the whole Master of Puppets on the Good Charlotte
Yeah.
tour.
And I love like the collabs you did do. Like I know you mentioned Kerry King, and then I know you did the Get Back with Ludacris. I thought was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know you actually remember the one I loved with you and with you guys with Rob Halford from Judas Priest was amazing.
Yeah, that was that thing. Oh, and I just remember the hip hop guy I was thinking of was Ja Rule and Nelly, that we did an icon thing with for Aerosmith.
All right,
Walk This
cool.
Way. Yeah, what were we just talking about? Oh, the 20th anniversary thing with Rob Halford. Yeah, that show kind of was a career changing moment for us because Fat Lip was kind of doing well, and they again asked us to be on the show and open the show again. And but we knew I don't think we thought that we could just go out and play Fat Lip. We wanted to like do something to like get some more attention. So I think Tommy Lee, we reached out and he was on board. And once he was on board, it was like kind of open season. I think we asked Slash to do it, but I don't think he was really into doing. He wasn't into doing Guns N' Roses at that time, and that's fine. So and then we reached out to Rob Halford, and he was in. And so after that show, I will say we things did change for us somehow. I don't know why, but I think the viewership of that must have been huge because it just seemed like our career just went from like here to like here overnight because of that show.
Yeah. Yeah, and also so one thought cover I thought was interesting. It's I think it was like live on MTV. You did that cover of "How You Remind Me" by Nickelback, and you actually make it sound better than the original, to be honest. How did that come to be?
Yeah, that was a New Year's Eve show. I think that came up. I think it was a guy on a record label Island, Lewis Largent. He was such a brilliant guy. He came up with a lot of great ideas. He came up with the idea for the In Too Deep video. Um, he always had these great ideas, and I think maybe that was one of his as well. And he, at the time, like Fat Lip was, I think it gone to #1 already in the U.S. How You Remind Me from Nickelback was #1 in the U.S. a different week. I think we were just like the two biggest kind of Canadian bands at the time out of Canada, and I think he was just like, why don't you cover their song?
Yeah,
And so yeah, we're like, yeah,
yeah.
let's do it.
And then kind of going, I know I kind of backtracked a little bit, but still talking about Chuck. I also, one of my most underrated Sum 41 songs is probably Newts, which is featured in Fantastic Four. I love that song. One question, how come it's never played live? Because I would kill to hear that song live.
Yeah, we get that once in a while, but I think so. This is the way we felt about it. We've talked about it before because we do get messages about it. It wasn't on the original album. It was kind of a bonus track, but it was on that soundtrack. We never played it live before, and at this point, it's like I think like if we played it, say we played it in Atlanta, I think there would probably be 10 people in the audience that might know
I
it.
would go ape shit.
Yeah, like the 10 people would probably freak out, and but then there'd be the other like 3,000 people that are like, is this a new song, or like I've never heard this before. So we're always when we make a set list, and when Derek kind of comes with a set list, it's always kind of like what is the majority of people going to be into, because it is cool to like single out 10 people and play a song for like 10 people, but at the end of the day we also have to like cater to the whole show. But I mean, I'd be up for playing it or trying it. but I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know what to say about that one. I do like it. I think you're right.
Yeah. Then you started touring for Chuck a little bit. Then it was in 2006 when Dave had left the band. So how shocked were you when you heard that Dave said like, "Hey guys, I'm leaving the band."
I think at that point, yeah, I was surprised, but I would say I wasn't like shocked because by the end of Chuck, he just seemed like he was distant from us a little bit. I don't even know how to explain it, but it just felt like he was drifting personally from us and musically from us. And I think even at that point, we were probably. I think the plan had been to probably do another kind of pop punk album, which was going to be under Class Hero. I think he was actually his mind was actually going the way opposite way. Like he wanted to go heavier than Chuck, and I think that's where the disconnect was. And I just don't think he was having fun at that moment. I know like later he has said explained that he was also having problems at home, which which is obviously true. So I think there's a lot going on with him, and yeah, I was surprised, but I would say yeah, I wasn't like super shocked.
Yeah. And then when it came to making Underclass Hero, how did that sort of like affect sort of like the chemistry and dynamic within Sum 41, since it was just first recorded as a three piece?
Yeah, I mean, Derek, Steve, and I spent a lot of time together. They were living in LA at the time, so I would fly down quite often, and we had this little rehearsal space that we had booked out for months. And so we just worked on it as a three piece. We recorded that as a three piece. That was a fun time though because we got really close during that. Not because it was like Dave or anything, but I think anytime like a member leaves, it actually pulls the other guys in even tighter. And of course, like I wish Dave never had to leave the band. But yeah, just stuff like that does happen. Like if you just get closer as a band when someone leaves for whatever reason. But yeah, we got super close on Underclass Hero, and we spent a lot of time together, and we did our best. And again, I still, as a pop punk album in 2007, when pop punk was like going downhill, I still think it's a strong album. I wouldn't change anything on that album. I like it still.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty solid album. Like even the title track, Walking Disaster with Me, I think those are some pretty good songs. And me being, of course, you're being interviewed by RichardMetalFan. I interviewed like death metal bands, black metal bands. So I'm pretty sure everybody will look at you all as like Emperor or something. So, you know,
Yeah, the thing is, yeah, it was a coming off Chuck. It was a challenge. It was also a challenge because, like I said, like that style of music was not big at the time. Like pop, I guess probably Blink was still big or Green Day, obviously, but the actual scene had kind of like fizzled a little bit. And the funny thing is, now when we play those songs and the album, I don't know. I think the album actually did debut at number one in Canada, but everywhere else it was kind of like didn't do that well. And now when we play those songs live, people go crazy. It's nuts. Like with me, that song with me is like one of the biggest songs in our set.
yeah.
So it's like it goes to show that maybe the album doesn't do something at the time, but it's like it takes years for it to really marinate with people and become something that they love.
Yeah. And it was around that time you also started the Operation MD with it was sort of like a little garage rock band. So how did the idea to of that side project come to be? Because I know you did those two albums and I've actually was listening to it in preparation for this interview and it's really catchy. Gee, tell me about that project.
Yeah, that I had met Todd on the 2001 Warp Tour. He was a founding member of H2O, and we for whatever reason we just became friends on that tour. And I think I was probably shocked that he even liked me because he was in like this hardcore band and we were this like new band. But we became friends, and we started joking even back then about side projects that were coming out that we didn't think that were very good. And there was a couple that were great, like the Transplants were doing their project. We thought that was amazing, but there was a couple others that we were like, eh. And then we started joking like we should do it. We should do a project and just like, you know, just make it like Violent Femmes meets the Hives or something like that. And that was kind of the idea. And but then it took a couple years. Like we started writing songs maybe around 2005, 2006. and we were both always on the road. And I'd go down and sleep on his couch in LA, and he'd come up to Toronto. And so, yeah, eventually we were able to get some kind of funding, and we got signed in Canada to the Sum 41 label Aquarius, and we put out the first one in 2007. So it was a busy year because Underclass Hero was also coming out as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And how different of a mind frame is it with the Operation MD compared to working with Sum 41?
It was Operation MD was definitely like more. It was less like, I mean, there was no pressure. And we were pretty much recording it all on our own, and we were just kind of learning. Like at the time, I I don't I don't I don't recall ever knowing much about recording software or outboard gear at the time. So we were basically learning and writing these songs. We didn't know what we even wanted to sound like. We just had this idea of garage rock in our minds. So yeah, it was pretty relaxed. Everything's very very relaxed in Operation MD.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there plans to do more stuff with MD, or what's the status with that?
It's possible. We have talked about it. I mean, Todd now plays bass in the Offspring,
Oh,
and
wow.
he has for a while. So with the two schedules, it's a little tough. But we have talked about it, and obviously with Sum 41 coming to an end next year, I'll have more time. I just don't know how if he's going to have any time. But yeah, we have talked about it. So
All right.
I hope we can do something.
Right. And then going back to Sum 41 with Underclass Zero, I thought it was a good album. And then you started touring for it, and then you got Tom in the band. So how did he end up joining?
So after we had recorded the album, we knew, we were like, well, we got to get another guitar player. We had asked him to come and audition in LA. We were holding auditions in LA. He flew out, and he was the first guy we ever played with, and we were like, okay, well, that's cool. He came in and he could sing it, he could sing the harmonies, and he could play the guitar parts. I actually didn't even know he was such a good guitar player, to be honest. Like, I knew coming from Gob, and we really loved Gob growing up, and we toured with Gob, but it was always seemed like there was never like shredding guitar solos and stuff. It was just kind of like cool riffs. And but when we really dug deep with Tom, it was like, this guy is just like a virtuoso musician, and he was so good. But so after Tom came into rehearsals, we already had other auditions lined up. Like, we had this like company that was like bringing guys in, and so we did the whole thing. We went through auditions with like randoms just coming in, and they'd come in and play two songs, and we'd shake hands, and the next guy would come in. And then I think at the end of it, we were just like, we'd already known Tom. We toured with Tom in Gob, and we just were like, this is the guy. But the tricky thing was, he was in Gob and he's the lead singer and the main songwriter. So it was a conversation that we had. It was like, are we breaking Gob up to offer him this job? And I think what we just did was we just left it up to him. We said, we're not going to be hurt if you say no, because we understand that you have this other band, and that's fine, but we are going to offer it to you. And we assumed that he really wanted it because he flew down to LA to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
So to audition in the first place. So yeah, it just worked out. It was a pretty seamless transition because I guess we already knew him, and yeah, just went from there. And it's amazing now he's still in the band, and he's like the guy on the road that I probably hang out with the most. I'll go for dinner with him all the time. We go for walks on days off, and yeah, we get along great.
Yeah. And then next up is Screaming Bloody Murder. I thought that was in my opinion, a very underrated Sum 41 album. So tell me about that, because I feel like it almost kind of like goes back into like a heavier direction. Was that sort of like the intention making Screaming Bloody Murder?
In a way, yeah. That's kind of like, for me, that's like the lost album. I feel like that album is, like you said, like severely underrated.
Yeah, like nobody ever really talks about it.
No, and it's the only album that we haven't released on vinyl, and there's a lot about that album, and I think it's because I think the main thing was that at the time when we released it in 2011, Island Def Jam, we were still on by that point, was like so not into us. Like, they really couldn't give a shit about us at the time, and it was all about pop music and hip hop, and we were just there. And I think they just contractually had to put it out because we were under contract, and they owed us a certain amount of money to record this album. and just get it out there. And that's what it felt like. We even made conscious efforts not even to let the record company in the studio. We didn't even want them to hear anything before it was released, because we just felt like we weren't seeing eye to eye with them. So, and at the time, Derek just got divorced, and so there was there was some darkness surrounding the band, and some it was a darker album for sure. And yeah, I think after Underclass Hero, we just went with the heavy again. And that's kind of what we have done through our whole career. We kind of flip flop a little bit. As of Scream Bloody Murder, we went pretty heavy from there on out. But up until that point, we kind of were like, what Sum 41 are you going to get this time?
Yeah. Yeah, but then you toured for a little bit, but then of course, like the band sort of like, I guess, went on a little hiatus with, of course, Steve leaving the band, and I know Derek had his health stuff. So during that little, I guess, break, what were you kind of like doing in the meantime?
I really got into producing. I was like, after that whole, after the break and Steve quit, to me, I felt like, well, maybe this band's never gonna, maybe that's it. The band's probably done. It's that's the feeling I kind of had. And Derek was, his health was deteriorating, and he needed to figure that out. He needed a lot of time to figure that out. And so I just kind of had it in my mind that maybe this is it for the band. And so I just went on this other journey of producing, and I just really got into producing. And I did a lot of bands, a lot of songs, and even songwriting with other bands and stuff like that. I even got into like a little bit of like jingle work, like writing jingles for commercials and stuff like that.
Wow.
And yeah, and then by 2014, I had my first kid. So then all that starts.
Yeah. Yeah. Does that sort of like change your like perspective on life in any way?
Uh, yeah. I mean, what it did was, when we started back up, it made me not want to go on like the 9 week tour or straight tours and stuff like that. Like, there had to be a point where, you know, I I needed to not be away from. I just felt like I couldn't be away from my son that long. That was going to be bad for me and my kid. And that was something that was new for the band. When we kind of fired back up, it was like, oh well, he's got a kid now. It's like crazy.
Yeah.
And that, Steve did have a kid, but just very, he had a kid, and then he kind of quit like pretty soon after. So the kid thing was a little bit new for Sum 41. So yeah, it did change things mentally for me, because it was like, well, I can't be away from this little person for that long. I have to see him every couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, and then going into the next album, 13 Voices, which a lot of people would consider it a comeback album. I thought it was like a great return to form, especially having like Dave back in the band. And then you got a new drummer, Frank Zumo. So how did Frank end up joining Sum 41?
He's in another group called Street Drum Corp, and he was actually on some Warp tours that we were on. I don't remember ever, like, we had talked about it. I don't recall like really hanging out with them, but we had met. But I think he became more friends with Derek when, in those 2 years that we were kind of off the road. And so when we came back, and obviously Steve was gone, we were getting some calls from other drummers. But I think Derek had played with Frank at a few like functions or charity events or something like that, where he called me and said, I got this guy that I think is amazing, and he'd be great for our band. He really wants to do it. He was actually like a big fan of the band back in the day. He knows the songs. So let's try it out. So I remember, Dave and I flew down to LA and did a rehearsal with them, and it gelled really, really quickly. And he knew all the songs, and it was great.
Yeah, and of course this was the first album since Chuck to have Dave back. So how did he end up coming back to the band?
Yeah, I think him and Derek, during those 2 years we were off, they started kind of reconnecting again. And I think the question maybe came up at some point of like, would you ever want to do this again? And Dave was like, yeah, apparently Dave, after he heard Scream Bloody Murder, was like, I could be in that band again. like that's the kind of the album he thought like I'd like to do that again. I want to be in that band again. So I think him and Derek talked about it a little bit. Derek called me up and said, "What about how do you like basically like thinking about should we ask Dave to be back in the band? He really wants to be back in the band." And my first reaction was like, "Well, we can't kick Tom out though. Like
Yeah.
there's no way like so that but that wasn't even like that wasn't I just that was my frame of mind. But Derek was like, "Oh yeah, of course not. We're just going to be three guitar players. We're going to be Iron
Yeah.
Maiden now."
Yeah, that was gonna be my first thing. So
Yeah.
how was like the how did like the chemistry now being like a five piece? Is how did
Um
that work out?
it's really great actually because it gives Derek an opportunity not to have to play guitar all the time.
Yeah.
So he kind of roams the stage just with a mic now, which actually elevates the show a lot because he can work the crowd and get them to do things instead of being strapped to his mic stand. And also, Tom plays piano and he's a really great musician and a great singer. So there's a lot of vocals that everyone can take, and Tom takes even some lead vocals here and there. So because of him being a lead singer, it really helps. And Dave's always done harmonies in our band, and he did a lot of harmonies and lead vocals in his other bands that he played in. So it just kind of made everything better and just better to have better musicians on stage with you.
Yeah, and it's cool to see like Dave and Tom playing together. I thought there would be kind of like awkwardness considering like Tom sort of like took over Dave after he left.
I think there was just kind of like I think at the beginning it was trying to I was trying to work out like, are you doing that solo or am I doing that solo? Because I used to do that solo. I know you've been doing that solo lately, but that was my solo. So I think it was like stuff like that. But they're both of them were really easygoing about it. And I think it just kind of worked itself out really. It's I think it was pretty I think it just took them to like really sit down together and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially like having now like two guitar players and having like Derek focus on vocals. I think it just focuses great, especially adding cuz that when there's like stuff like I see like older performances that I hear like on the record. I kind of wished you did like live back then, but you didn't have because like the limitations. But with having now five members, it just you don't have to worry about using like backing tracks or nothing.
Yeah, we don't use I'm proud to say we don't use any backing tracks for vocals or guitars or bass or anything. The only things we'll add in are things like if there's like an intro to a song, like it's like a I don't know if you I don't even know how to explain it, but if there's like a synthy intro to a song that we're coming out to, well, obviously we can't play that, so we use that. But no, we don't use any vocals on track. We don't have a Pro Tools guy or anything like that. We don't use any guitars, any vocals, anything. Yeah, we're like full on still like live band, live music.
Yeah, and it just works really well. And then tell me about like 13 Voices. Like I thought it was great. And one thing I remember watching an interview with Derek, like apparently the album was like written in chronological order, like how it was appeared on the album.
For Order and Decline.
Yeah, or 13 Voices.
Oh, 13 Voices, sorry. Yeah, that's news to me. But yeah, I think I was when we kind of started talking again and he was like, let's do the band again and let's get this thing fired up. He already had a couple songs demoed, so he sent them over and we started working on them right away. And I don't know, maybe he did, maybe that is chronological order of how it all went down, but I just know that I was just really excited that we were going to do this again. And because like I said, like I thought possibly the band was done. And so yeah, I was excited. I was also excited to like get my friend back because him and we didn't necessarily talk, if at all, during those 2 years. It was a weird time. And so I was really, not just because of the band being back, but I was like, I get my friend back, and it was a good time
Yeah.
for me.
And then of course your previous album, Order and Decline. I thought that was a pretty good album. Did you feel like more comfortable with 13 Voices being as now it was like you had some time after being away for a few years? Like how was it like making Order and Decline?
I think actually Order and Decline was a little bit more comfortable because 13 Voices, you're kind of like just getting the swing of it again, and you're kind of getting back into this thing, and you're You know, everything's kind of new now. Dave's back. We got a new drummer, and it's like it's almost feels like you're in a new band all of a sudden. But with Order and Decline, we had now been doing it again, and we've been doing it for a few years again, and so it just felt like it was just like an old hat for Order and Decline. And you know, we were able to get to, you know, what there wasn't the pandemic yet, so we could all get together and we pre-pro'd that album together, and yeah, it was cool. You know, Order and Decline, I think, is another one of those lost albums that people don't talk about because we released it at the end of 2019 and we couldn't finish the tour for it. Like we
Yeah.
couldn't properly promote it because the pandemic happened.
Yeah. And it was during during the pandemic, you just started like working on what would become your new and final album, Heaven and Hell.
Yeah. So the pandemic hit, and I mean, we were probably at least 8 months into the pandemic, and when Derek started like telling us that he's got new songs and he wants to send us some demos, and I think all of us were like, yeah, like let's get busy, because you know, pandemic, boredom, and just like crazy, just crazy, you know, just boredom. And so when Derek started sending over some demos, it was like it was exciting. It was an exciting time, and it was a lot too. I was like, wow, he's been busy writing, because by the end of it, we had recorded 22 songs. Um, and the crazy thing about that was like he was sending all these songs, and I was like, for me to write some bass on and stuff like that. But all these songs sounded very different from each other. It was like, you know, some batches of like old school Sum 41, like pop punk, In Too Deep's, Fat Lips, and Motivations. But then there's like these heavy songs he was sending. I was like, wow, these are like the heaviest songs that we've ever recorded. And I was like, I was starting to think as I was recording, I was like, how are these going to fit on the same album together? You know, it just didn't seem logical that, you know, a song like Landmines and a song like Over the Edge or something would like be able to intertwine on an album. I was like, all right. But he was, you know, he's always like, let's just record all these songs. We don't even know if we're going to use them. We don't know what we're going to do with them. Let's just record them. And I
Right.
think when it was all done, we all kind of sat back and was like, double album.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Because
basically the only way the songs really fit on the album together. It's like two separate albums, but just make it one.
yeah. But how long have you sort of been thinking about like the double concept album?
There was I feel like on Underclass Hero there was almost an idea, like I think that swirled around, because I think that album ended up being 15 songs. I feel like possibly we were talking about a double album back then, like maybe we should just do a couple more and make it a double album, because we were definitely conscious and excited back in like 2007 about like concept albums and stuff like that too. So I think, you know, like Pink Floyd stuff and all that kind of stuff, we were like, maybe we should do like a double album concept album, but
Yeah.
we just never did it. And so I think this made the most sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember like listening to the album when it came out, and I thought it was really great. But it's also bittersweet that this is going to be the final Sum 41 album and with the breakup next year. Sure, but is there like the one song that you pretty much like knew when making Heaven and Hell that you would knowing that this would be the last?
Not really. You know, after we recorded the album, it was done. I just based it in my brain. I thought this was just this. We're just gonna go again. This is it. We're gonna be this album's done. We're gonna tour it. We're gonna take some time off, write another album. I thought this the cycle was just gonna keep going. It was Derek. You know, Derek, when Derek sent the message and wanted to talk and explained why he wanted the band in, I was shocked. Like it wasn't. I didn't see it coming.
Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't like some so it wasn't like planned all along. It was just like you were kind of like shocked, like all shocked as well when you heard like, hey, the band's gonna be done soon.
Yeah, there was no lead on. There was no like in during the recording process. There was nothing like, yeah, we're recording this album. It's going to be the last. That was never a thing. We were, I think Derek, I think obviously had it in his head that this potentially, or he was having thoughts about like how long is this band really going to go? Like, how am I going to, you know, how am I going to be able to do other things? And that's been going on for a couple of years. But I think when the album was done, he came to grips that this could be the last album and should be the last album. And but that was all news to us. It was like the thing is because there's no like fight. We all still get along. We're friends, and there was no like big blow up where it's like, yeah, fuck you, band's done. There was nothing like that, like you hear with a lot of bands where
Yeah,
you
it's all
start
like
hating.
the Hollywood diva shit.
Yeah, well, they start hating each other and they can't stand each other. They can't look at each other on stage. There was nothing like that.
Yeah. And what would you say that Sum 41 in your career in general has gone in the trajectory you have imagined it would and have you wanted it to?
I think everything. I think I was surprised at every step along the way because it didn't seem logical that like these bratty teenage kids in Ajax, Ontario, Canada could achieve what we achieved. That was never. I just that wasn't even a. I think even the fact that we got signed to a U.S. record deal like that I look back on that and that blows my mind still. So I think I was really surprised at every moment along the way. Like I remember just being like in a studio with Iggy Pop in LA. And I was like, we're recording a song with Iggy Pop? Like that just seems crazy to me.
Yeah. And then and kind of want to switch topics because I also want to talk about like your bass playing. And I know you've heard all the bass player jokes and the memes out there, but I love how you don't gravitate towards flashy bass playing, but instead you find ways to link what the guitars are doing with the melody and what the drums are doing with the rhythm, but in a very creative sense. So what's your approach to slap at a bass?
Yeah, it's different every time, and I think actually on the more metally side of stuff on Heaven and Hell, there's like probably less. Um, there's a lot of riffs, so it's like you're basically just playing what the guitars are playing for a lot of these riffs. But on the pop punk side, there's actually some room because like you're back to like 3-4 chord punk songs, so it's like there's some room to move around on the bass. That's kind of what it is. I just kind of like listen whenever Derek will send me a song. I just kind of listen to it a few times, and I'm just like, I actually play without playing my bass. I kind of like hum stuff in my head. That's how kind of it starts. I'm just like, I'm hearing the melody and I'm hearing like the chords, and I kind of just like did it. I just kind of like do these little bass runs while I'm listening to it, and then I kind of pick up the bass and try and figure that out and try and be like, oh yeah, what was I humming? That's
Yeah.
basically how it starts. Is I have to listen to the song a bunch of times first and
Yeah.
kind of play some riffs in my head, like bass riffs in my head.
Yeah. And after when Sum 41 is all done, what's next for you personally? Are you still going to continue with music?
Oh yeah. I'm definitely not retiring from music whatsoever. I did another interview today. I was laughing about it. I was like, none of us have gone to college. None of us have went to university. Dave didn't even graduate high school. so, so
Yeah.
we've only known music our whole life. That's all I know. I can golf a little bit, but I'm definitely not going to be a professional golfer. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, I don't have a plan yet, and I don't want to stress myself out with trying to make a plan at this point because I have so much Sum 41 to still do, which is exciting. But yeah, it's something in music. I don't know what that means yet or what it is, but there'll be something.
Yeah. And what for you what would you say like for you would want fans to remember Sum 41 for? Because I grew up listening to you guys. I've been a fan of you guys since I was like 10 years old and I'm 30 now. So thank you guys for just like creating like great music. So what would you want people to remember Sum 41 for?
Um, a good live band. That's what we've always prided ourselves on. That maybe if you've gone to a show, you have a good memory about one of our concerts, because that's really the most important thing for us is like the shows.
Yeah.
Obviously, obviously the songs, but when the songs are done and we've done our best on the records, we really have the most fun playing shows. So I hope that that's come across in the last 27 years or 28 years we've been together.
Yeah.
Um, that's what we pride ourselves on. So hopefully people remember us as a good live band.
Yeah. And of course, Sum 41 will play their last show ever at the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Canada in January of next year. Is there any plans to like film that show for a DVD?
Possibly. That hasn't got brought up. You're not the first person to say that though. But it's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, do people buy DVDs anymore, or will it just go up on YouTube?
Yeah. I mean, people do both. I mean, I buy DVDs still.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, especially if it's going to be the last Sum 41 show, you guys have to really like give it make it all out.
Yeah, it's true. Oh, it'll be a big one, and it'll be emotional because obviously we're gonna have all of our family, every friend we've ever known probably will be there. So there's people flying in from everywhere. It's yeah, it's gonna be. I'm kind of not looking forward to it, honestly, just because of the emotions I feel like I'm gonna have. But it's we could not do it in Toronto. Let's put it that way. It had to
Yeah.
be in Toronto.
Yeah, it would have to be where it all began.
That's where it all began. Yeah.
Hell yeah. So thank you, Cone, for this conversation. It's so glad to have Sum 41 on my show, and thank you for the great music over the years, and thank you for just influencing me, which later getting me into like heavier bands as I got older. So there's just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching this to close this out?
Well, first, yeah, thank you for what you just said. Means a lot, and thanks for having me. And I mean, we're on tour right now. I'm guessing that a lot of your viewers are in the U.S. and so we're doing 10 weeks this year in the U.S. So we'll probably be if we're probably coming through your town because it's a lot of shows in the U.S.
Awesome. So everybody, Cone from Sum 41. See